Hello, and welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast. Today is Tuesday, April 15th. Happy tax day to everybody out there. We've got a good show for you today. So today we're going to cover some top returning edge rushers on defense, as well as preview Indiana and Michigan, some Big Ten teams that are pretty interesting this upcoming season. And make sure you stick around for later in the show, where I'm going to give you some players from this year's draft class, that I think could potentially deserve to have their jerseys retired by their college programs in the next few years or so. But before we start, I'd like to ask everyone that you like and follow the show, and also if you've got a question during the show, we'd love to hear it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy, your insights, your comments. So whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or just an opinion that you have to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out, gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that we love, and we appreciate every bit of your support. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit that super chat button. Let's make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. If you prefer, you can go to gsmcsport.net to tip, donate, leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support. We are so glad to have you as a part of our community here at GSMC. So let's talk a little bit about some edge rushers today. Obviously, this is a premium position. More and more importance is being placed on your pass rush in present day and modern football, especially at the college football level, where you see a lot of teams are passing the vast majority of the time on offense. So one guy I'm really looking at this year is Suntarine Perkins from Ole Miss, University of Mississippi. So Suntarine Perkins was a former 5-star recruit. This was a big-time pickup for Lane Kiffin when they got him to commit out of high school. Really one of the crown jewels of his recruiting tenure at Ole Miss. Kind of a big-time pickup for him. Kid from Mississippi, didn't let him leave the state. It was huge to get Perkins at Ole Miss. So he as a freshman, he kind of played off-ball linebacker a little more. They're trying to ease him kind of into the defense, into learning the scheme, learning the system. So he really rotated in at off-ball linebacker. It was clear that the talent level was there. Probably just wasn't used to the college level at that point as a true freshman. Last year, they pretty much transitioned him full-time to the edge as a true sophomore, and he really had a strong season. Had 10.5 sacks, had 60 total tackles last year, and was kind of grew into that role as a really premier pass rusher for the Rebels. He's going to be the big piece for Ole Miss for their defense this year, and he's going to have a little bit less help. He won't have defensive tackle Walter Nolan in the middle. He will not have his bookend, Princely Uman on the other side, rushing the passer opposite of him. So it's really going to be on Suntarine Perkins this year to kind of lead the way for Ole Miss, to be the guy that they look up to make big plays in key situations. It's going to be on Suntarine Perkins. And this is a guy that has the talent. He can clearly do it at a high level. We just haven't seen it a whole lot. Kind of similar to Abdul Carter from Penn State, where they transitioned to that edge, and he's still growing on the edge. He is pretty small for an edge rusher, though. He's only 6'1", listed at 210 pounds. A guy that's really going to try to beat you with his speed, with his quick first step, explosiveness, and he's really going to try to use a speed rush to beat a tackle outside and get to the quarterback. But Suntarine Perkins is a guy that really has potential as a 15-sack guy, especially kind of without some of that help. It's going to be interesting to see, does that either help his play or does that kind of detract from what he's doing on the field? We're going to find out. But I think Perkins is a guy that could really have a great season for the Rebels. Another guy I'm looking at that's really kind of flying under the radar, I didn't really know his name that much. And then I looked at numbers and I was like, whoa, this dude can play ball, is Eric O'Neill. So Eric O'Neill was a JMU guy, was at James Madison with Curt Cignetti, and now he's transferring to Rutgers. He originally was a Long Island kid, went to Long Island University for 2022-2023, played at that level, and really showed out. During that time, he had 45.5 tackles for loss in those 2 seasons, really showcasing his ability to get in the backfield, to put pressure on a quarterback, on an opposing rushing attack as well. And he was also the Conference Player of the Year in 2023 for Long Island. This is a guy that can do it. Then he went up to the next level last season, played at JMU for a year, and he really went off. He had 13 sacks, 3 passes defended, had an interception, had 52 total tackles. So he carried that production up to James Madison last year. Obviously went up a level in competition and just the caliber of athletes that he's kind of playing against, playing with. He jumped up and he still was able to put up some numbers. So now going from James Madison into the Big Ten, Eric O'Neill's going to be at Rutgers. Rutgers doesn't have a whole lot this year. This is going to be a guy that's really going to be looked at to force that pass rush, to kind of generate it and get some sacks for Rutgers. I think that's just the level of production. Clearly this kid has a drive to try to compete at the highest level, has moved up in competition twice now. Obviously, JMU is now an FBS team in the Sun Belt, but it's not the Big Ten. Rutgers, they could have a tough year in the Big Ten, but I think Eric O'Neill is another guy where his numbers might showcase really what he can do in kind of a higher program, higher caliber setting, higher caliber competition in the Big Ten. I think that's going to be a guy that his numbers may look a lot better, and it could be a name we hear a lot more towards the end of the season, kind of flying under the radar right now, just because of James Madison, because of not really coming from a high-profile program. I think that's a big part of kind of where Eric O'Neill is really falling under the radar, but I think that's a name to look at for this season. Another name, the last name we'll know, is Matayo Uiagalelei, Oregon defensive end, younger brother of DJ, obviously, and he's really starting to step out of the shadows of his brother. He's honestly been the better college player. Obviously, they played 2 different positions, but Matayo's been a guy for Oregon. He had a really good year last year, 10.5 sacks, forced 2 fumbles, had a pass defense, had an interception, had 38 total tackles. This is a guy that's probably going to be the face of the Oregon defense this season. He's also going to lose a little bit of help in the form of Derek Harmon, who is going to the NFL this season. Potential first-round pick, probably a day 2 guy, but still a really productive defensive tackle that really helped out Uiagalelei and the Oregon pass rush just overall. I think this is a guy that is bigger. He has really good positional size. He's 6'5", 265. He's got a solid frame where he's strong, but he doesn't look too thick, doesn't look too big. And he really has unique athleticism for the position. He played both ways in high school. He played tight end. He really could have been a strong tight end recruit as well, where he probably could have been a 3 or 4 star tight end and played at a power program as a tight end. So this is a guy that clearly has a lot of athletic ability, and he really kind of uses that athleticism to beat blockers. He's really explosive, really agile, has strong change of direction, especially for a defensive end. He moves well laterally across the line of scrimmage. when defending against the run as well as just defending against the pass, obviously. But this is a guy that's going to rely on his athleticism, and he will beat blockers just because of that athleticism. Is still a strong pass rusher, has a lot of tools in his moveset, but this is a guy that's really going to use his body to try and expose blockers, exploit kind of an advantage in athleticism. That's going to be Matayo Uiagalelei. I think he could also have a really strong season, especially just Oregon will probably still be in contention for a college football playoff berth and for a national championship. And Matayo Uiagalelei is going to be a big part of that. Another guy I'm looking at is Mikail Kamara from Indiana. This was a huge part of their defense. He was a guy that was maybe going to go to the draft, decided to stay at Indiana for another season, run it back with Curt Cignetti in year 2. I'm going to talk a little bit about them later on in the show, but another guy who had a really great 2024, had 10 total sacks, 47 total tackles, and he's only 6'1", he is 265, so a little shorter, but still has a really solid frame where he's not going to get pushed around. He's really sturdy in his moves, in what he's trying to do to get to the passer. This was a guy, though, he led the FBS in quarterback pressures last season with 68 quarterback pressures, which is a crazy number, especially playing in the Big Ten. That's a conference where you traditionally have really strong offensive line play. Obviously, I ranked them as the number 1 conference yesterday, I think, for coming into this season. It's a strong league, and the fact that Kamara had 68 total pressures while playing mostly Big Ten opponents is really impressive. He is also going to be switching positions this year, so he's going to move to what Indiana calls their stud position, and it's kind of a hybrid off-ball linebacker, hybrid stand-up defensive end position, but it's really going to let him focus and key in on rushing the quarterback, and I think that's going to be something that's really interesting. Obviously, he had a great season rushing the quarterback last year, and if he's going to be keying in on the quarterback even more this year, those numbers could go up even more. Kamara, I think, is a guy that is really going to have a great season for Indiana. And I think if they're kind of still in the national conversation in November, you're going to hear his name a lot more than we currently do right now. The last guy I want to talk about a little bit is TJ Parker from Clemson. Clemson has kind of had a rough stretch on defense the past year or two. I think they finished 69th last year in total defense. Obviously not where they want to be if they're trying to compete for a national championship, for a college football playoff berth. He was a big pickup for them in 2023. This was a high 4-star, one of the guys that were really kind of bookending that recruiting class for Clemson. He's mostly a stand-up pass rusher. He's got a really strong natural bend. He's able to get around and kind of bend around tackles really easily. That's kind of his big calling card as a pass rusher. He's also just really, really well-rounded. He's got a lot of speed movesets, obviously, just with that bend, but he can also use his hands. He's got a lot of power sets as well, and he kind of switches it up to beat blockers, which is a big thing for his success. I think he's also really smooth just in his movement. He moves well. Doesn't really ever look like he's awkward or kind of out of place. He always kind of seems to be in the right place at the right time. And again, had a strong 2024, 11 sacks last season, 57 total tackles. And then I think the big number for TJ Parker is that he forced 6 fumbles last season, which that's a really big number. 6 forced fumbles. I'm not sure how many Clemson actually recovered. I did not look that up. But the fact that TJ Parker's forcing 6 fumbles off of the edge is really impressive, and kind of shows how he uses his hands really well, is able to get to the quarterback and just kind of get that ball out of there. That's a really impressive skill that not a lot of guys can do at a high level and can do it consistently. but TJ Parker clearly can. And I think that's something that's really key to what makes him a good pass rusher, a strong pass rusher, is just his ability to kind of use his hands and get the ball out of the quarterback's hand, the running back, whoever it is. But 6 forced fumbles on the season last year for TJ Parker, that's a really big number. And if he kind of keeps that up, he could be even higher in this conversation for edge rushers that are returning. So now we're going to take our first break of the show. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Maxx Crosby, Eastern Michigan, and kind of his new role there. So stay with us, and we will be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Network. Before we get into anything else, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. We love hearing your thoughts, your questions, your opinions as we dive into the latest sports action. Whether you've got a burning question, bold prediction, just want to shout out your favorite player, don't hold back, drop it in the chat. If you want to make sure that your message really stands out, why don't you use the super chat feature? Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your message. It's a surefire way to get our attention. We are so grateful for your help, your support here at the GSMC Network to keep bringing you the sports content that you love. And we are so glad to have you as a part of our community here. Now, before we talk a little bit about Maxx Crosby, Anthony had a question about what my thoughts are on the Mikail Uiagalelei situation and where I think he lands. He also asked, is it confirmed that he already signed a transfer NIL deal with North Carolina? So the North Carolina thing first, I have not seen anything confirmed. I know that was kind of discussed about that he was maybe going to Chapel Hill, teaming up with Bill Belichick. I saw that might not actually be the case. I'd be kind of surprised, honestly, if he did end up at North Carolina. I kind of think Bill Belichick wants to stay hands off of that whole situation there, especially as his first year as a college coach. I don't know if he kind of wants that in the locker room, just the whole contract negotiations and all of that. I think as he transitions to college, I don't know if he really wants that kind of situation in his locker room at Chapel Hill. I really think the big school that I'm looking at right now for Nico is UCLA. He's from Long Beach, kind of from that area. His brother Madden was committed to UCLA for a long time, ended up flipping on signing day, flipped to Arkansas. But UCLA, I think, is a school that makes a lot of sense for Nico. Don't really have an established starter at quarterback right now. I think they'd be a little more willing to give him the contract that he wants. I have seen a couple other schools that they've kind of talked about. Notre Dame was getting thrown out as a school. I don't really see them going after Nico, kind of approaching him. They already have a couple different quarterbacks that they like at Notre Dame. where I'm not sure if that's actually a place that would make sense for him. I don't know also if it's a culture fit. UCLA is really the big one I'm looking at right now for Nico. I could certainly see North Carolina. I think that one's a little more far-fetched. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think that's a little more unlikely to happen than I think something like a UCLA or another West Coast school like that. I think that's probably a little more likely for Nico, but we're going to wait and see. That's going to be a really interesting one to look at, especially the portal opens officially tomorrow. But there's not a lot of teams right now that really need a quarterback. Most of the teams that kind of had quarterback questions going into this season addressed that in the winter portal. I don't blame Nico for the situation. Blame Tennessee. I agree. Yeah, they set the precedent, so they can't really blame themselves, or they can't really blame Nico for kind of asking for more money. They are the program that kind of set this whole thing in motion. They gave him that $8 million deal before he even stepped on campus in Knoxville. I wasn't really surprised. Washington or Stanford. Both of those, I think, are solid options for Nico. I think Washington might be a little more likely just in terms of resources and NIL deals. Obviously, Stanford does have Andrew Luck in charge there. It seems like they're trying to build back up that program. I don't know if they'd want to spend, $3 or $4 million on a quarterback, though. They're kind of a little more. They keep their money a little more close to the chest. They don't really give it out as much like that. I think Washington, though, that actually is a program that would make a lot of sense for Nico. Obviously, he's still going to stay. He would be in the Big Ten, still stay in a power conference, and go back to the West Coast. I hadn't thought about Washington, honestly, but thinking about it, it does make a lot of sense. That could be a really good landing spot for him, especially just trying to compete in the Big Ten. Obviously, he would be an upgrade for them. I think that would make a lot of sense as a potential landing spot for Nico. So, we are going to switch gears a little bit, talk about Maxx Crosby. So, it came out that he was now taking a front office role for Eastern Michigan, becoming an assistant general manager for their football program. He's the first active NFL player to kind of do this, which is really intriguing. You've seen a couple guys from the NBA do this: Steph Curry, Trae Young, Terrence Mann. They're all now assistant GMs for their college basketball programs. But this is really the first time that this has happened for an active NFL player. And it's kind of interesting. I kind of wonder what actually he's going to do. So, reportedly, his new role involves evaluating prospects, managing the NIL budget, as well as just supporting student athletes, and leading alumni relations and fundraising events. All seems kind of vague to me. Not really sure what actually his role will be. But obviously, this is Eastern Michigan's most successful NFL player in a long time. He set their school record. He had 20 career sacks from 2016 to 2018 when he was at Eastern Michigan. He's also really taken a lead in trying to build up that program. 2023, him and his wife Rachel, they donated $1 million to Eastern Michigan's athletic department, which led to the football field being named in his honor. He also launched a fundraising campaign pledging to match donations up to $100,000 through May, just trying to build up support for the Eastern Michigan football program. And, despite this new role, he's obviously still committed to the NFL, just signed a big extension with the Raiders this offseason. Had been in trade rumors for a couple years, but is going to be in Vegas for a while. And this is this is kind of an interesting move. I like it. I think it makes sense for guys like Maxx Crosby that, came from smaller programs, came from programs from conferences like the MAC, to try to build up those schools. They're obviously kind of in a tough spot right now where, the Power 2 conferences, the Power 4, they're really starting to separate themselves even more. And then, if you have a really good kid, a really strong performer at an Eastern Michigan or at a Kent State or an Akron, one of those schools, they're probably going to end up leaving after they have a strong year. Another program's going to end up giving them more money, and they're going to leave that conference. They're going to leave that school. I kind of like it, though. I think it makes a lot of sense for, schools like Eastern Michigan to get their former athletes involved in this. Maxx Crosby is going to be the guy that, that's going to drive the market for Eastern Michigan, that's going to drive recruiting, is having a guy that you can go, hey, look at him. He had success here in 2 or 3 years. He became an NFL starter, an NFL star. This is something that you can do at this program too. I wonder if we're going to start seeing a little more of this just throughout college football, especially with programs like this. I don't know if it's really going to be a thing at, Georgia or an Ohio State or an Alabama where, they already have really strong NFL connections. There's no need to sell the program. There's no need to have to drum up more NIL support because it's kind of already been established. You're going to have boosters that are going to give to the program. You're going to have guys that are going to go to that school purely because of the NFL production, trying to get to the next level. Eastern Michigan, they've kind of been mediocre in the MAC the past couple of years. They finished 5-7 last year, didn't make a bowl game. They finished 6-7 the year before. They did make a bowl game. They got blown out by South Alabama, like 59-10. The other thing I was kind of questioning with this is, will Maxx Crosby actually kind of have any impact on recruiting for Eastern Michigan? I think that's probably the biggest kind of question mark around these kind of rules, is just what do they actually do for recruiting these kids? And I think particularly in the Las Vegas area, obviously Maxx Crosby playing there right now, is that going to be almost where he's kind of an area scout? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. But I could see something like that where, he gives them a couple guys from the Vegas area that he's heard about and say, hey, maybe you go look at this kid. Will that actually kind of affect recruiting, how they approach getting players? Obviously, schools like that, the MAC schools, they're really going for local programs, local players for the most part. That's going to be where a lot of their guys are from. So is this going to kind of be something where Maxx Crosby actually does affect anything? He's a Michigan kid too. I don't remember exactly where from in Michigan, but obviously Michigan kid went to Eastern Michigan. That's kind of the trend for those MAC programs, is you get the local kids and you try to develop them and hope that in a couple years that they're, solid contributors, starters to your program. But I'm really looking at what's this going to do for, are they going to try to expand into Vegas, try to get some of those kids? Are they going to try to get some Cali kids from the West Coast? I think that's going to be kind of an interesting thing. And then also, will this give Eastern Michigan a leg up in the MAC in terms of them competing in their conference? No other MAC teams kind of have a guy like this right now that's doing anything similar. So I wonder, is this going to be something where Eastern Michigan actually gets a leg up because of Maxx Crosby, or is it kind of just something that happens in the news cycle and, it won't really affect anything on a day-to-day basis? That's going to be the big thing here. I don't know. I think we're going to find out. I kind of wonder how these assistant GM roles actually work, if that's going to be something that is staying power. Will that be a trend that continues? in the next few years. I think it probably will. And I think each program will probably kind of have different roles and expectations for those GMs. But we're going to take another break on the show now. And when we come back, we're going to go a little Big Ten, talk a little bit about Indiana and their upcoming season. But we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on Tuesday, April 15th. Just talked a little bit about Maxx Crosby. We're going to switch gears. We're going to preview Indiana and the Hoosiers for this upcoming season. Indiana obviously had a great season last year under first-year head coach Curt Cignetti. Ended up being the 10th seed. They were in the college football playoff. I think they had a really good season last year, 10 wins, and this is a team that's going to be really interesting to watch this season. So they did lose quarterback Kurtis Rourke. He was kind of their leader. Their quarterback last year, the past 2 seasons, came in from Ohio, really played well for Indiana. Not a super strong quarterback, but a guy that could study the offense and kind of right the ship and get Indiana back on track. I'm honestly more of a fan of the quarterback they brought in, Fernando Mendoza, who was the Cal starter last year. I think that kid's a total gamer. He almost beat Miami and had a couple other games where it really just showcased his talent as a quarterback. And I think he could bring Indiana's offense kind of to the next level and make them even better on offense from the past season. I think that they're probably their range is a pretty big for this season. I think they could go anywhere from about 500. I think they're going to be above 500. I think it's at least a 7-win season for Indiana. Their schedule really isn't super tough this year. I think that's going to be a big part of it. They do have a couple tough road games. I'm going to talk about the schedule in a little bit. But I think the strength of their offense there is really going to drive their success this year. Their O-line is really strong unit. They return Carter Smith, who had been their left tackle since 2023, is going to be a 3-year starter now coming in this year. Has been really strong for them at that position. You kind of have the left tackle anchored. Bray Lynch is probably going to be their left guard. They brought in Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, who was a really great center for the Irish. What are your thoughts on my comment? National media. I can't stand that national media is blaming Mario. No, I don't know if it's Miami's fault. I don't really see that being the case, honestly. I think that's more of a Tennessee Nico internal kind of issue. I haven't seen a whole lot of that, but I don't really see Miami kind of being at fault there. I don't think they really had a strong role in what happened with Nico. I can understand why that might kind of be the national point of view, I guess, or perception, just from bringing in Carson Beck, giving him the contract that they did. But again, I don't think that's what Miami did is the reason for Nico. Obviously, I think he did want more money, and then he looked at that Carson Beck deal and said, hey, why don't I get something similar? ESPN Ryan Clark. Yeah, that makes sense. I really don't see it being Miami's fault, I guess. I think cause and effect are probably two different things in this case, but Nico, I think more of it is probably stemming from that high school deal, and he's saying, hey, I want this money updated to kind of be in line with the top of the market, and I don't think really Tennessee wanted to give him that, and it seemed like a big thing was just his lack of contact with Tennessee, with the coaching staff. He basically just ghosted them on Friday, on Thursday night. They hadn't really heard from him. I think that was more of just kind of why he's really gone now at Tennessee. I think there's no route back for him at Tennessee. But I wouldn't place the blame on Miami on kind of what happened there. Miami was just trying to fill a hole at their quarterback position. And I don't really think that you can blame them for kind of what's happening at Knoxville. From my point of view, I could see the argument, but personally I don't really agree with that point of view. I think that's kind of a little bit separate. Obviously, the issue of NIL, quarterback contracts, it's all kind of tied together, but I think what happened at Miami is different from the situation at Tennessee, to where I don't know if it's really kind of what happened at Miami caused, essentially, Nico leaving Tennessee. I don't know if that's the case there. But, so, I think Indiana, though, they're going to be a good team this year. I think they're going to be better than people expect. Their floor, I believe, is higher than it used to be in previous circumstances, where I think their O-line, their offense is really going to be a big strength for them this season. They return Elijah Sarratt, E.J. Williams at wide receiver. Elijah Sarratt had a top 10 year as a wide receiver this past season. Excuse me, sorry. For the Hoosiers, where he's going to give Fernando Mendoza a really strong target to fall back on. And I think the wide receivers are going to be a position where they will help out their quarterback. They will not hurt their quarterback this year for Indiana. The Hoosiers, they did lose their top two running backs. They lost Justice Ellison, also lost Tyson Lawton, and they're really going to be relying on returner Kaelon Black to kind of carry that load. They also brought in Roman Hemby, Lee Beebe Jr., transfers from Maryland and UAB respectively, to kind of help carry that backfield. It seems like it's going to be more of a running back by committee type backfield, but that's kind of been a trend in football, especially in college football, the past 5-10 years, where you kind of have a running back by approach. Defense is going to be interesting for them. The D line is a little more shaky. They lost C.J. West, James Carpenter, Linnell Carr Jr., lost a couple other guys. So that's really going to be a big question mark for them. They do return Mikail Kamara. That's going to be the big guy for them on defense. Obviously, I previewed him in my top edge rushers. But then there's also going to be transfers. Jose Wheeler, as well as Dominique Ratcliffe. Those are going to be names to watch for Indiana on the D-line. Big bodies, they brought them in at D-tackle. One of those two guys is probably going to start. They're both going to play a lot for the Hoosiers. I think those are going to be two guys that could have really good years in their first year at Indiana. They also did lose both starting safeties. They lost Sean Asbury. He was third on the team in tackles. He had 69 tackles last season. Also lost Terry Jones. They did bring in some transfers in the secondary as well, brought in Devin Boykin, Lewis Moore. Lewis Moore was interesting. He was a community college guy, went to Indiana for a couple years, then transferred to Ole Miss last year. Didn't really play a lot, transferred back to Indiana this season. So he does know Indiana well, and that's going to be a position that's going to be up in the air for Indiana. They do return Amari Farrell. He's probably going to take over one of that outside cornerback spots. But the rest of those positions are really in flux right now for Indiana. And looking at their schedule, I think there's a couple games to kind of circle for the Hoosiers. Starting off in September 20th, it's their week 3 or 4. They have a couple games, Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, should kind of be warm-ups for them. You never know, but should be pretty winnable games for Indiana. I think Illinois at home, week 4, that's going to be really interesting. Illinois is another team that's been pretty strong in the past few years, but I think if Indiana wins that, then they're going 4-0 into Iowa, which again, that's going to be a tough place to play. Iowa's always a hard place to play, and they're always a pretty strong team. Besides that, then, I think the Oregon game is going to be key for them. They do have to play at Eugene, at Autzen Stadium in October, as well as playing at Happy Valley, which is going to be another tough game. But I think Oregon, Penn State, and the Illinois game are going to be the games to circle for Indiana. It's certainly possible, though, that they lose that Iowa game, possibly maybe lose against Maryland. So I think probably 75 is going to be the floor for Indiana. But this is a team that, if everything kind of breaks right, I think they can win 10, 11 games again this next season and potentially be in the college football playoff. So Indiana going to be another team to watch that might be kind of fun again this year. Obviously more of a basketball school traditionally, but they've been playing some pretty good football. So we are going to take another break on our show, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about another Big Ten team. We're going to switch gears, talk about Michigan a little bit, and kind of what their season looks like. But we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just talked a little bit about the Indiana Hoosiers. We're going to go up north, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Michigan Wolverines and kind of what their season might look like. They really had an interesting 2024 season. It was kind of strange. They were 500 for most of the year, really struggled on offense, but they did end on a really high note. They went into Columbus, beat Ohio State in the shoe, then played Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Alabama almost got into the college football playoff this year. Didn't have a great season for Alabama standards, but but Alabama still had a really good season. Michigan, though, were able to beat them in the ReliaQuest Bowl and have some momentum coming into this season. So the quarterback situation, again, that's going to be the big talking point around Michigan this year, but it should be much improved. They finally have Bryce Underwood in town, number 1 quarterback, number 1 overall prospect in the 2025 class. Belleville, Michigan kid, was committed to LSU for a long time. They were able to kind of lure him away with a double-digit NIL package. So Bryce Underwood's there. Obviously, that's going to be your quarterback of the future. The question is, will he start right away? The other name is going to be Mikey Keene. Mikey Keene was brought in from Fresno State, also was at UCF for a few years. But even if Mikey Keene starts, he still should be an upgrade over the guys they had last season. He completed 70% of his passes last year, threw for 2,900 passing yards, had 18 touchdowns. So obviously can play, is still a really solid quarterback option. I think he's better than the Davis Warrens, the Alex Orgis that Michigan was running out last year to start for them. He did have 11 interceptions, and he had 10 in 2023, so that's kind of going to be something to watch if Mickey Keene does end up starting. Can he take care of the ball? Can he protect it? Michigan is normally kind of risk-averse on offense. They run a more traditional offense for the most part. It will be interesting, though, which one does end up starting. Is it going to be Bryce Underwood? Is it going to be Mickey Keene? Running back's going to be an interesting room for them this year. Donovan Edwards is gone, but they do return Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall. Those are going to be your big two guys. Justice Haynes was an Alabama transfer, really talented running back. That's going to be a guy that can showcase what he can do in a more expanded role for Michigan. And then Jordan Marshall, he was a Michigan recruit. He was a high 4-star running back from Archbishop Moeller, Cincinnati, Ohio. And he kind of showed out at the end of the year, was the MVP of the ReliaQuest game, had 100 rushing yards during that bowl game, kind of showcased what he can do, and potentially have a bigger role for the offense this season. Wideout, again, is going to be a big question mark for Michigan. Samaj Morgan, Kendrick Bell, they're probably going to have first shot at starting. They're probably going to have the most amount of opportunities, but there's 5 or 6 guys kind of all in the mix for playing time at wide receiver for Michigan. Nobody's really stood out so far, and that's going to be probably a question mark throughout the season, where we don't really know who Michigan's number 1 wide receiver is going to be. Tight end is also obviously going to be concerned. They're losing Colson Loveland, all Big Ten tight end, probably going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft this year. That's going to be a big loss for them. Security blanket across the middle as a tight end. He was really a key part of their offense when they actually looked like they were clicking. Colson Loveland was normally a big part of that. Offensive line is also kind of a question mark right now for them. Most likely it's going to be shuffled throughout the season. Giovanni El Hadi, he's probably going to play left guard for them. They brought in Cal Poly transfer Brady Norton. He's going to fight for a spot, probably at right tackle, but still kind of a question mark on where he might actually end up. And then another guy, Nathan Afobe, he's really emerged as a potential option at right guard for Michigan. Had a really solid spring so far, kind of showcasing what he can do in a starting role on that offensive line. D-line is also going to be a big spot of turnover for Michigan. Michigan is losing probably top 5 pick Mason Graham, as well as Kenneth Grant, who's a day 2 guy, and Josiah Stewart, who was their top pass rusher last season. They're all gone. So it's probably going to be more of a committee approach this season. Rayshawn Benny, that's going to be the big name to kind of watch here. He looks like he could be a breakout guy for Michigan on that D-line, has kind of been in line the past couple seasons to take that role over when those guys leave. Obviously, that time is now. They also brought in a couple transfers, Trey Williams, Damon Payne. Those guys also came in from Clemson and Alabama, respectively. But they bring a lot more size, a little more versatility kind of into that D-line group. But all those guys I mentioned are all pretty much 310 pounds plus. So these are some big boys that Michigan brought in. They're going to have a lot of size on the D-line. They're probably going to have 3 or 4 guys rotating in that are at least 310 pounds. And that's going to be a big thing for stopping the run. Obviously, in the Big Ten, it's more of a run-based league than some of the other power conferences. But the size there is going to be huge for Michigan. Remains to be seen if those guys can actually replace the production that Michigan's going to lose. Obviously, Mason Graham had a historic career at Michigan. Kenneth Grant also was a guy that played really, really well for the Wolverines and gave them a huge body in the middle, where those are going to be 2 really big pieces to replace. How Michigan does it is going to be kind of interesting. Then at linebacker, Michigan normally has pretty strong linebackers. The headliners here, Jason Barham, Ernest Hausman, those are the 2 big names to look at for Michigan. Barham started all 13 games last year for Michigan. He transferred in. I forget where his previous school was, but transferred in from Maryland. I had it, actually. Transferred in from Maryland, started all 13 games. Should be a little more comfortable in year 2 at Michigan in that defense. And then Ernest Hausman, according to linebackers coach Brian Jean-Marie, Hausman has been kind of the unquestioned team leader for Michigan, really taking over that vocal leadership role that you see a lot of times linebackers do kind of end up taking that on. Just kind of how their personalities are. A lot of times you have linebackers take over as the vocal leader of a group, especially of a defensive unit. Nathaniel Uwusu-Boateng is an early enrollee. That's another guy to look out for. That could potentially play early on in his Michigan career. Really highly regarded recruit for the Wolverines. That's going to be a kid that could play early on just from his skill set. He has reportedly looked really good in the spring already, and that's going to be a big thing for Michigan. Secondary also has a ton of losses for the Wolverines. Will Johnson, Quentin Johnson, Makari Page, they're all gone. All starters past few years for them. Had a ton of experience there. Zeke Berry, Jair Hill, those are the only returning starters for Michigan. Berry in particular, he really had an up and down 2024. Obviously, he played a lot, but he kind of got picked on he struggled with double moves, struggled with some of the more experienced wide receivers in the Big Ten, just in their savviness, I guess. He kind of had a tough go, but he's most likely going to get another shot. Michigan is going to give him more opportunities, especially coming in, having another year under his belt. Cornerback is a really tough position to play if you're not playing all the time, or if you are young especially. It's a tough position to learn. There's a lot of nuance to it. But Barry will get more time. He'll get more experience. He's going to get another shot to kind of show what he can do. Another name there is Rod Moore. He's probably going to either play the nickel or one of the safety spots for them. Missed all this past season, had a torn ACL, so didn't play in 2024. But coming back for this season, should probably lock up one of those spots. If he doesn't, he'll definitely still play a good chunk of the time for Michigan. Looking at their schedule then, I think week 2 is going to be a big matchup for them. They have to go to Norman, Oklahoma, play the Sooners. Obviously, the Sooners struggled last year, just overall, especially in SEC play. But they brought in new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. Not really sure how they're going to be this year, but that's going to be a tough game for Michigan, having to go to Norman and play them week 2. I think that's probably going to be a really tough one for them. Nebraska going to play at Nebraska in week 4, September 20th. That's also going to be a game that I'm going to watch for Michigan, just having to play Dylan Raiola. Nebraska, they could be improved, especially Raiola coming into that second year as a starter. They also have to go play at USC. I'm not a huge believer in USC's talents this year, but Still going to be a tough game on the road, having to switch time zones. And it's going to be a tough one for Michigan, I think, having to go on the road and play USC, especially if USC has any type of momentum at that time in the season. They do get Ohio State at home this year. That's going to be big for them. If they're able to keep their streak rolling against Ohio State, that would be a huge statement win for Michigan and for their season. So now we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders. Their jerseys are being retired. I'm going to talk a little bit about guys from this draft class that I think could potentially have their jerseys retired down the line. But stick with us. We'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on today, Tuesday, April 15th. Just talked a little bit about a few Big Ten teams. We're going to have a little fun here, though. We're going to talk about some guys that I think could have their numbers retired from this year's draft class, the 2025 draft class. Came out that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are both going to have their numbers retired by Colorado. I thought that was kind of interesting. I do have Travis Hunter on my list of guys who could potentially have their jerseys retired. Obviously, he is going to have his retired, so that's not a question mark anymore. But I think of those two guys, Travis Hunter makes a lot more sense to have his number retired. This was a kid that won the Heisman this past season, just playing both ways of the ball. We haven't really seen that since really Desmond Howard, but even Desmond Howard played primarily on defense, did play a little bit of offense. Travis Hunter played both ways for the most part the entire time he was in college. Was able to really bring back a culture of winning football kind of to Colorado, to Boulder for at least a little bit of time. This is a kid that's a culture setter, trendsetter. Coming out of high school, he was the number 1 overall prospect, committed to Jackson State. So kind of always did things his own way. And that's going to be a player that fans will appreciate even further down the line, 15, 20 years from now. And just the numbers, too. 96 catches, 1,250 receiving yards this season, 15 receiving touchdowns, as well as having a rushing touchdown. And then he also had 35 tackles, had 4 interceptions, forced 1 fumble, elite production on both sides of the ball, and just, I think, kind of the whole name, I guess, just what Travis Hunter brings to a program. I think that's going to be a guy that his college career is really looked on favorably. I don't love the Shedeur Sanders jersey number being retired. I can understand part of it. I think from a numbers perspective, some of the stats that he put up during his time at Colorado really kind of showcased his skill. I think that might be more of, hey, Deion's the head coach and Shedeur's going to get his jersey retired. But I could be wrong. I don't know about that one. Another guy I'm going to look at is Ashton Jeanty. Obviously, he wore number 2. The single digits are a little harder to retire just because everybody wants to wear a single digit nowadays. but just what he did at Boise State, setting Boise records, almost setting the NCAA rushing record. He was 27 yards away from breaking Barry Sanders' single year rushing record, had 2,600 rushing yards this season, which is unbelievable. Averaged 7 yards a carry for those 2,600 yards, had 350 carries this season. He had 29 rushing touchdowns, had 23 catches, had 46 catches last season. Again, had a really strong 2023 season, had over 1,900 total yards, had 1,350 rushing, 570 offense. But the fact that he ran for 2,600 rushing yards is pretty unbelievable. Obviously, only Barry Sanders has had that type of season before. This is a guy that I would have never expected we'd see anybody come anywhere close to touching Barry Sanders' record. But Ashton Jeanty was right there. And then just the team success, too. He basically carried Boise State to the Mountain West title this season, carried them to a college football playoff berth. They did have a lot of other weapons. Maddox Madsen is a pretty solid quarterback for them. But that team ran through Ashton Jeanty. Boise State, their success was pretty much on his back. And I think that's going to be a guy that, if you look at his career down the line, what he did for Boise, just both individually as well as for the team, is pretty remarkable. I think Boise's a place that could probably recognize that and kind of showcase what he did for them. Another guy that's kind of under the radar, but he's probably going to be a second-round pick in the draft this year. I think, though, he's almost more likely to have his number retired, is Shavon Revel Jr., East Carolina cornerback. And so this kid is beloved in East Carolina, has a really cool story. He was a warehouse worker in 2021, working night shifts. He drove after his 10-hour shift to a camp at East Carolina. They'd offer him a scholarship on the spot then. Ended up joining the program kind of after all that and really worked his butt off. 2022, played a little bit. He got hurt then, but he really kind of came into his own in 2023, 2 years ago. He had 12 pass breakups. He blocked 2 kicks. He had 54 total tackles. And he forced incompletions on 22% of the passes that were thrown his way. That really only trailed Quinyon Mitchell, who obviously was a first-rounder for the Eagles out of Toledo. And then after that 2023 season, Revel had a bunch of NIL offers. There were a couple different schools that were looking at him. I know Louisville was one, but he had offers for basically $1 million a year to go play at other programs, bigger programs. He turned those all down. East Carolina told him, hey, we can't pay you this. It's just not in our NIL fund. It's not in our budget. And he still turned that down. He said, no, I'm staying here. Y'all gave me a chance. You gave me a shot to compete. I'm going to stay here at East Carolina. He really got off to a great start this past season, 2024. He had 2 interceptions in the first 3 games, took one to the house, had a pick 6, but then he tore his ACL after the 3rd game of the season in practice midweek, just on a random non-contact injury, kind of hit the turf weird, tore his ACL. So this is a guy that doesn't have a ton of elite level production, but I think the story and just the program being at East Carolina, it's not, a really high caliber program where a lot of guys are coming through. I think that could be a place that eventually you see his number being in the rafters, especially if, he does have a lengthy NFL career, a successful NFL career. I think that's a guy that, you could see his number 28 being retired at East Carolina just for the story. And he did have a couple really solid years there where they could look at the production still, it's still really possible just from a production point of view. The last guy I kind of want to touch on is Mike Green out of Marshall. Now, I will preface this, Marshall only has one jersey retired, and it's not the two names that I thought of. It's some guy from back in the 50s or 60s. I can't remember his name right now. But Chad Pennington, Randy Moss, both do not have jerseys retired at Marshall, which I kind of thought was crazy just from, their run that they had when they were at Marshall. But Mike Green is Marshall's biggest profile prospect by far since then. He's probably going to be a first-round pick. This was a guy, though, he had an awesome 2024 season. He was a transfer from Virginia, transferred in after 2022, but he was at Marshall the past 2 seasons. And he had a good 2023 season, had 41 tackles, 4.5 sacks, so good but not great. But this past season had 17 sacks, led the FBS, had 81 total tackles, and also Marshall was 10-3 this past season. Finished first in their conference, had a really good year, kind of brought Marshall back to winning football. I think that could be a guy that maybe down the road, again, him and Siobhan Ravel, I think, are 2 guys that this kind of depends on how their NFL careers go. But I think if Mike Green has a solid NFL career, has a lengthy one, he could potentially also be a guy that maybe does get his jersey eventually retired by Marshall. I think that one's probably a little more unlikely, just because you look at the history, too, of Chad Pennington, Randy Moss. Both don't have their numbers up in the rafters there. So it'd probably be kind of hard for Mike Green to get his up there before those guys. So we are going to end our show for the day. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, like, follow, leave a positive review, and if you want even more sports content, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, just more of those sports content, sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to